The calculation Julian Blackwood surveyed the charity gala from the mezzanine, mentally calculating the net worth in the room. At 38, he'd built Blackwood Analytics into a $22 billion empire by understanding patterns that others missed. People were predictable. Their behaviors could be quantified, their decisions anticipated. It was simply mathematics. "Mr. Blackwood, your speech is in 15 minutes, his assistant Thomas reminded him. Julian nodded, straightening his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. "The donation announcement is prepared?" "Yes, sir. 20 million for the education initiative. The press is ready." This wasn't generosity. It was strategy. The tax benefits and positive PR would increase shareholder value by an estimated 3.2%. Julian had run the numbers himself. He descended the marble staircase, accepting handshakes and exchanging pleasantries with practiced efficiency. Julian had learned to mimic warmth. It was a necessary business skill, though one he found tedious. That's when he saw her. She stood near a display about the education initiative, distinctly underdressed in a simple blue dress that had seen better days. While other women dripped, with diamonds and designer labels, she wore only a modest silver pendant. Her chestnut hair was gathered in a simple updo, a few curls escaping to frame her face. Julian found himself walking toward her, drawn by an unfamiliar impulse. "Not enjoying the champagne?" he asked, noting her untouched glass. She turned, revealing warm brown eyes that widened slightly in recognition. "I'm more of a tea person, honestly. The champagne is just for show." Her smile was genuine, lacking the calculation he was accustomed to. "You're Julian Blackwood." "I am. And you are?" "Olivia Winters. I teach kindergarten at Westbrook Elementary." Julian raised an eyebrow. "That's in the Pinecrest district?" "Yes. Not exactly the prestigious part of town," she acknowledged without embarrassment. "What brings you to a 10,000 per plate fundraiser?" "I won a ticket in the teacher's lottery. The foundation gives a few seats to educators." She gestured to the display. "This initiative could bring technology to schools like mine. I wanted to see what it was all about." Julian studied her with newfound interest. "And what do you think?" "I think it's well-intentioned but missing something critical." She bit her lip, then continued. "Technology is wonderful, but what these children need most is human connection. Tablets can't replace mentorship." Her directness surprised him. Most people told him what they thought he wanted to hear. Bold statement to make to the man funding the initiative. Olivia's cheeks flushed, but she didn't back down. Bold would be spending $20 million without listening to the people who work with these children every day. Something unfamiliar stirred in Julian's chest. Respect, perhaps. Before he could respond, Thomas appeared at his side. "Sir, 2 minutes." "Duty calls," Julian said. "Enjoy your evening, Ms. Winters." Later, after his perfectly delivered speech and the predictable standing ovation, Julian found himself searching for her. He spotted Olivia deep in conversation with the foundation's education director, gesturing passionately. "The teacher?" Thomas inquired, following his gaze. "Find out more about her," Julian said. Hours later, they stood on the terrace, the city lights spread below them like a circuit board. Olivia's laughter at his dry observations about the other guests was unexpectedly musical. "You're not what I expected, Mr. Blackwood." "Julian," he corrected. "And what did you expect?" "Someone colder." "More." She searched for the word. "Algorithmic?" "Exactly." She smiled. "But there's more to you than spreadsheets and stock prices." No one had seen through him so easily before. It was unsettling. When he offered to drive her home, Olivia hesitated only briefly before accepting. In his Bentley, she gazed out at the city with childlike wonder. Her apartment building was modest but well kept. Outside her door, Julian hesitated. Another unfamiliar sensation. "Would you like to come in for tea?" Olivia offered. "Real tea, not champagne." That night, over Earl Grey and conversation that ranged from educational theory to astronomy, Julian experienced something he couldn't quantify. When Olivia's fingers brushed his as she took his cup, the electrical response defied calculation. By morning, tangled in her sheets, Julian watched her sleeping form and felt panic rising. This wasn't in his life plan. Unquantifiable emotions were dangerous variables. When Olivia woke, she immediately sensed the change. His walls had returned. "Julian, this was an error in judgment," he said coolly, already dressed. "Enjoyable, but an error nonetheless." He saw the hurt flash in her eyes before she masked it with dignity. "I see. Well, thank you for the clarification." As his car pulled away, Julian ignored the uncomfortable sensation in his chest. It was simply biological, dopamine and serotonin, nothing more. He deleted her number from his phone. Some equations weren't meant to be solved. The variable 3 months had passed since that night. Julian had efficiently compartmentalized the memory of Olivia Winters, filing it away like outdated code. He occasionally found himself distracted by the memory of her laugh or the warmth in her eyes. He simply redirected his thoughts to more productive matters. Today he stood in the gleaming lobby of Blackwood Analytics' newest building, a $300 million testament to his success. The first floor would house the company's Future Builders initiative, a STEM education center for underprivileged students. It was good optics, and the tax benefits were substantial. "Everything is on schedule," said Rebecca Zhang, his head of community relations. "The center opens next week. We've partnered with local schools to bring students in 3 days a week." Julian nodded, scanning the space with a critical eye. "The equipment?" "State-of-the-art. Each station has the latest Blackwood tablets and programming interfaces." "Good. What about instructors?" Rebecca consulted her tablet. "We've hired 4 tech specialists, and several schools are sending teachers to help integrate the curriculum." Julian was half listening as they toured the facility, mentally calculating the return on investment in terms of future recruitment and brand loyalty. The tour ended at a small classroom where a training session was underway. "This is where we're briefing the participating teachers on our systems," Rebecca explained. Julian glanced through the glass door and froze. Olivia Winters sat at one of the workstations, her chestnut hair pulled back in a ponytail, brow furrowed in concentration. As she navigated the tablet's interface, she looked exactly as he remembered, yet somehow more vibrant. "Who approved the participating schools?" he asked sharply. Rebecca blinked at his tone. "The foundation selected schools with the highest need. Westbrook Elementary has the lowest technology budget in the district." Julian considered turning around. He could easily delegate this to Rebecca. There was no logical reason for him to enter that room. Instead, he pushed open the door. The instructor paused mid-sentence. "Mr. Blackwood, we weren't expecting you." 20 pairs of eyes turned toward him. One pair widened in recognition. "Please continue," Julian said smoothly. "I'm just observing." He positioned himself against the back wall, ostensibly watching the instructor demonstrate the tablet features. In reality, his attention was fixed on Olivia. She was determinedly avoiding looking at him, focusing intensely on the screen before her. Her shoulders were tense, her movements deliberate. Julian found himself cataloging these details with unnecessary precision. When the session broke for lunch, Olivia was the first to exit, slipping past him without acknowledgement. Julian followed, catching up to her in the hallway. "Ms. Winters." She stopped but didn't turn. "Mr. Blackwood." "I wasn't aware Westbrook was participating in the program." Olivia finally faced him, her expression carefully neutral. "I almost withdrew when I learned it was your company, but I don't let personal errors in judgment
interfere with my students' opportunities." The echo of his own cold words stung unexpectedly. "I'm glad you didn't withdraw," he found himself saying. "The program needs passionate educators." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise perhaps.
"Well, it needs something. Your technology is impressive, but your curriculum lacks creativity. Children need more than algorithms to engage with learning." Julian raised an eyebrow. "You're criticizing my program while standing in my building, too?" His surprise, a small smile tugged at her lips. "Someone should." You've surrounded yourself with people who only tell you what you want to hear. Before he could respond, a small voice interrupted them. Ms. Winters, are you coming to lunch? A young boy with thick glasses and a future builder's t-shirt that hung to his knees stood nearby, looking at Olivia with adoration. Her entire demeanor transformed. Of course, Daniel. I was just talking to the owner of this building. Daniel regarded Julian with solemn eyes. You have a lot of computers. I, too, Julian replied, unexpectedly disarmed. Ms. Winters says computers are tools, not toys or friends. People are friends. Does she? Julian glanced at Olivia, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. It's part of our digital literacy curriculum, she explained. Julian knelt to the boy's level, something he'd never done before. What would make these computers better, Daniel? The boy considered this seriously. Games that teach you stuff without feeling like school. And robots. Definitely robots. Noted. Julian stood. Ms. Winters, perhaps you could provide some input on our curriculum, if you believe it's lacking. Olivia studied him suspiciously. Why would you want my input? Because contrary to popular belief, I value efficiency. If our program isn't optimized for its users, it's wasteful. Fine. I'll email some suggestions. I prefer direct communication. Dinner tonight, to discuss the curriculum. Olivia's eyes narrowed. That's not necessary. I insist. 7 o'clock. I'll send a car. I can drive myself, she countered. Julian suppressed a smile. Her defiance was refreshing. As you wish. The address will be messaged to you. That evening, in a private dining room at Lumiere, Julian checked his watch for the third time. It was 7:15. Perhaps she wouldn't come. The door opened, and Olivia entered. She'd changed into a simple emerald dress that complemented her eyes. No designer label, no expensive jewelry, yet she outshone every socialite he'd ever dated. I almost didn't come, she said without preamble. Why did you? Olivia sat across from him. Because 10 of my students were selected for your program. If I can improve their experience, my personal feelings are irrelevant. Julian studied her. You truly care about them. Of course I do. That's what teaching is, caring enough to help someone grow. She unfolded her napkin. Now, about your curriculum. For 2 hours, they discussed educational theory and practical applications. Julian found himself taking notes, actually writing things down, something he rarely did. Olivia's insights were intuitive rather than data-driven, yet strangely compelling. You should join the development team, he said finally. Olivia laughed. I have 26 kindergartners who would strongly object. Consultant, then. 2 afternoons. A week. She tilted her head. Why are you doing this, Julian? Really? The question caught him off guard. Why indeed? The program didn't need her specific input. There were dozens of qualified educators he could hire. Your variable perspective has value, he said finally. Variable perspective, she repeated softly. Is that what I am to you? A variable in your equation? Julian didn't answer. The truth was he didn't know anymore. Olivia Winters had introduced an unpredictability to his carefully ordered world, and against all logic, he wanted to understand it. When he walked her to her car, their hands brushed accidentally. The same electrical response flickered through him, defying his attempts to dismiss it. I'll consider your offer, Olivia said, unlocking her door. Good. Julian hesitated. And, Olivia, about that night? She shook her head. Don't. You made yourself perfectly clear. As he watched her drive away, Julian realized something disturbing. For the first time in his life, his calculations felt incomplete. The constant Wednesdays and Fridays, 3:15 p.m. For 6 weeks now, these time slots had become immovable fixtures in Julian Blackwood's otherwise fluid schedule. His executive team had learned not to question these mysterious appointments, though rumors circulated. Some speculated about secret acquisitions, others about medical treatments. None guessed the truth, that the billionaire CEO spent these hours sitting cross-legged on a colorful mat, surrounded by 7-year-olds. Today, Julian watched as Olivia guided her small group through an exercise in computational thinking. Rather than using tablets, they were arranging physical blocks to create a simple algorithm. Her methods were unorthodox but undeniably effective. "Mr. Julian, I did it," exclaimed Zoe, a tiny girl with braids and missing front teeth. She'd managed to arrange her blocks to complete the pattern. "Excellent work," Julian replied, still uncomfortable with children's unfiltered enthusiasm, but learning to respond appropriately. "You identified the pattern variable." Olivia caught his eye across the room and smiled briefly before turning her attention back to another student. That small smile, so genuine, so undemanding, created an inexplicable warmth in his chest. When the session ended and the children departed with their after-school coordinators, Olivia approached him, wiping marker from her hands. "You were good with Zoe today," she observed. "You're getting better at speaking their language." Julian stood, straightening his suit jacket. He'd taken to removing his tie before these sessions, his one concession to informality. Their language is simply pattern recognition with emotional components. It's not dissimilar to market analysis. Olivia laughed, the sound still musical to his ears. "Only you would compare children to market trends." "Am I wrong?" "Not entirely," she admitted, gathering her materials. "But there's more magic to it than your algorithms can capture." They had fallen into a routine. After each session, they would discuss the results, suggest modifications to the curriculum, debate teaching methods. These conversations had become the highlight of Julian's week, though he wouldn't admit this aloud. "Coffee," he suggested, another departure from routine. They normally parted ways after their debriefing. Olivia looked surprised but nodded. "I could use the caffeine. The fundraiser preparation is keeping me up at night." "Fundraiser?" "For Westbrook's arts program. Budget cuts," she explained as they walked to the small cafe adjacent to the building. "We're trying to save Ms. Patel's music classes." Julian held the door for her. "Your school seems perpetually underfunded." "Welcome to public education," Olivia sighed, ordering a simple latte. Julian requested black coffee, then insisted on paying despite her protests. At a corner table, Olivia rubbed her temples. "Sorry, I'm just stressed about the numbers. We need to raise $50,000 by next month and we're nowhere close." Julian studied her. In the 6 weeks of their professional relationship, he'd learned that Olivia never asked for help directly. Her pride was as strong as her compassion. "What sort of fundraiser?" "The usual desperate attempts. Bake sale, silent auction with donated items, a student performance." She stirred her coffee absently. "The parents are working multiple jobs just to make rent. They can't contribute much." Julian calculated quickly. $50,000 was what he spent on a weekend trip to Tokyo. He could write a check now and solve her problem. But something told him Olivia wouldn't accept such a gesture. Perhaps Blackwood Analytics could sponsor the event, he suggested instead. Corporate social responsibility. Olivia's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Why would you do that?" "Tax benefits," he replied automatically. "Positive PR." "Right." Her tone was skeptical. "Nothing to do with me asking." "You didn't ask." "I offered." Julian sipped his coffee. "But there's a condition." "Of course there is. I want to attend." Olivia nearly choked on her latte. "You want to attend a school fundraiser, with paper plates and crayon art and off-key singing? Is that so surprising?" "Julian, you wore Ferragamo loafers to sit on a kindergarten floor." "Yes, it's surprising." He shrugged. "I'm interested in observing the community dynamics." The truth was more complex. Julian wanted to see Olivia in her natural environment, among the people and children she cared about. It was an irrational desire, but one he couldn't seem to override. "Fine," she finally agreed. "Next Friday, 6 p.m., dress casually, and I mean actually casual, not I paid $5,000 for these jeans casual." The following Friday found Julian in the most casual clothes he owned, dark jeans and a gray sweater that his stylist had once insisted he buy. He felt strangely exposed without his usual armor of tailored suits. Westbrook Elementary's gymnasium had been transformed with streamers and hand-painted banners. Tables lined the walls displaying everything from homemade cookies to handcrafted jewelry. Children darted between adults, their excitement palpable. Julian stood awkwardly near the entrance until a small figure crashed into his legs. "Mr. Julian!" Daniel, the boy from their first re-encounter, grinned up at him. "You came to our school." "So, I did," Julian replied, oddly pleased by the recognition. "Come see my robot drawing, it's for the auction." Before Julian could respond, Daniel had grabbed his hand, pulling him toward a display of framed artwork. The sensation of those small fingers wrapped trustingly around his was startling. Daniel proudly pointed to a colorful drawing of what appeared to be a robot teaching a group of children. "That's you," he explained, pointing to the robot. "And that's Ms. Winters, and that's our class." Julian stared at the crayon depiction, unexpectedly moved. "It's very accurate," he managed. "It's $15, Daniel informed him seriously. "For the music class." Julian pulled out his wallet and handed the boy a 20. "Keep the change." Daniel's eyes widened. "Really? Thanks, Mr. Julian." As the boy scampered off, Julian heard a familiar voice behind him. "I see you've been coerced into supporting the arts." He turned to find Olivia watching him, amusement dancing in her eyes. She looked different. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she wore a simple sundress with a cardigan. Less like a teacher, more like the woman he'd met that first night. "Supply and demand," he replied. "Clearly his art has market value." "Clearly," she smiled. "Thank you for coming, and for the sponsorship." The check was generous. Julian had donated $100,000, twice what they needed. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing to us." Olivia's expression turned serious. "These kids will have music for another year because of you." Her gratitude made him uncomfortable. "Your determination was the critical factor. I merely provided capital." "Right, just business." Something in her tone suggested she didn't quite believe him. "Well, Mr. Business, how about some punch?" Fair warning, it was mixed by second graders. The evening progressed in a blur of unfamiliar experiences. Julian sampled homemade foods, bid on handcrafted items, and found himself judging a paper airplane contest. Throughout it all, he watched Olivia. How she knew every child's name, how parents sought her counsel, how her laugh seemed to brighten the entire room. During the student performance, an endearingly chaotic rendition of songs from around the world, Julian observed how Olivia mouthed the words along with the children, offering encouraging smiles to those who faltered. "They're not exactly the New York Philharmonic," she whispered, catching his expression. "No," Julian agreed. "They're more interesting." Her surprised smile felt like a victory. Later, as the event wound down, Julian found himself helping Olivia. Stack chairs. It was manual labor, something he hadn't done since college, yet he didn't mind. "Final tally is just over $65,000, Olivia reported, her face flushed with victory. "Ms. Patel is crying in the supply closet. Happy tears," she clarified. "You achieved your objective," Julian noted. "Efficiently, too." "We did," she corrected. "You're part of this success, Julian." They stood close in the emptying gymnasium, the strange magnetism between them suddenly palpable. For a moment, Julian thought about closing the distance, about discovering if her lips still tasted the same. Instead, he took a step back. "I should go." Disappointment flickered across her face. "Of course, you must be busy tomorrow." "I'm having brunch with the governor," he confirmed. "But I was thinking, there's an exhibition on educational technology at the Science Center next weekend. Would you be interested in attending to evaluate potential additions to our program?" "Are you asking me on a date, Julian Blackwood?" Olivia challenged. "I'm proposing a professional research excursion," he clarified stiffly. "Of course you are." She shook her head, but her eyes were warm. "Yes, I'll join your Professional research excursion. As Julian drove home that night, he realized something disconcerting. For all his careful compartmentalization, Olivia Winters had become a constant in his equations, a fixed point around which his thoughts increasingly orbited. The question was, what did he intend to do about it? The function. Julian studied the quarterly projections with uncharacteristic distraction. The numbers, usually so absorbing, failed to command his full attention. His mind kept drifting to the weekend, to Olivia's face illuminated by wonder as they explored the science center, to her infectious enthusiasm when discovering new educational tools, to the warmth of her hand when it accidentally brushed his. "Sir?" Thomas's voice broke through his reverie. "The board is waiting." Julian nodded, gathering his materials. "Has the analysis on the Henderson acquisition been completed?" "Yes, sir. Rebecca will present the findings." As Julian strode toward the boardroom, his phone vibrated with a message. He glanced at it surreptitiously. "Olivia. The kids loved the robotic building kits you sent. Even Principal Garcia played with them. Thank you." A small, unbidden smile touched his lips before he could suppress it. The $30,000 investment in educational materials for Westbrook had been impulsive, not a word typically associated with Julian Blackwood, but the results appeared favorable. The board meeting proceeded efficiently until Rebecca Zhang's community relations update. "Finally, I should note that the district has announced significant restructuring due to budget constraints," she reported. "Several schools will be consolidated next year, including Westbrook Elementary." Julian's head snapped up. "Consolidated?" Rebecca nodded. "The students will be redistributed to other schools. The property will likely be sold for development." "And the teachers? Some will be reassigned, others let go." "It's unfortunate, but outside our sphere of influence." Julian forced his expression to remain neutral, though his mind was calculating rapidly. "What's the district's deficit?" Rebecca consulted her tablet. "According to public records, about $3.2 million for that cluster of schools." "Continue with the report," Julian instructed, making a note to have his team gather more information. Later that evening, Julian sat in his penthouse office surrounded by digital displays showing Westbrook's financial data, property assessments, and district budgets. The solution was simple, mathematically speaking. A $3.2 million donation would preserve the school for another year. But it would be merely a temporary fix. His phone rang, Olivia's name appearing on the screen. Julian hesitated before answering. "Did you know?" Her voice was tight with emotion. "I learned today," he admitted. "I assume you received official notification, an email. After 5 years of service, I get a form email saying my position is being eliminated." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm not just worried about my job, Julian. These children need stability. Many of them already face tremendous challenges at home." Julian weighed his response carefully. "What does the teachers' union say?" "They're fighting it, but the district's decision seems final. Unless a miracle happens in the next 3 weeks." She paused. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't burden you with this. It's not your problem." But somehow, it had become his problem. The thought of Olivia's classroom empty, of Daniel and Zoe and the others dispersed, created an uncomfortable pressure in his chest. "Have dinner with me tomorrow," he said abruptly. "Julian, I appreciate it, but I'm not in the mood for company, not socially. I want to discuss some ideas regarding the situation." Her sigh was audible. "Fine. But I warn you, I'm not going to be good company." The following evening, Julian's driver collected Olivia from her apartment. She appeared at the Yuck Guy restaurant in jeans and a simple blouse, her eyes bearing evidence of recent tears despite obvious efforts to conceal them. "This is still too fancy for my current mood," she said as they were seated in the private dining room. "The privacy is functional, not decorative," Julian replied. "I've been researching your school's situation." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Why?" It was a fair question, One Julian had asked himself repeatedly over the past 24 hours. The answer he'd arrived at was troublingly simple because it mattered to her. The Future Builders program has invested significantly in Westbrook's students. Disruption would be inefficient. Olivia's expression suggested she didn't entirely believe this explanation, but she didn't challenge it. So, what did you find? Julian outlined the financial realities facing the district, explaining the broader economic forces at work. As he spoke, he monitored Olivia's reactions, noting the moment when resignation began to replace her initial anger. So there's nothing to be done, she concluded when he finished. It's just numbers. Numbers can be rewritten, Julian countered. I've identified several options. He presented each scenario methodically. A direct donation to preserve the current structure temporarily, a private foundation to operate the school independently, a corporate partnership program that would provide sustainable funding in exchange for technology implementation. Olivia listened intently, asking astute questions about each option. The teacher was evident in her methodical analysis. These are all generous proposals, she said finally, but they all involve you writing a very large check. Julian shrugged. Money is a tool, in this case an effective one. Why would you do this? Olivia pressed, leaning forward. The truth, Julian, not some line about program efficiency or tax benefits. The intensity of her gaze made evasion difficult. Julian chose his words carefully. I find that I value the work you do. The environment you've created at Westbrook, it would be a loss if it disappeared. A loss to whom? The question hung between them, demanding honesty. Julian set down his fork, meeting her eyes directly. To the children, to the community. He paused. To me. Something shifted in Olivia's expression, surprise, followed by a softening. That might be the most human thing you've ever said to me. I am human, contrary to popular belief, Julian replied dryly. Sometimes I wonder. But she was smiling now, a small, genuine smile that created that strange warmth in his chest again. Julian, I appreciate what you're offering, more than I can express, but I can't let you solve this problem by throwing money at it. Why not? It's an efficient solution, because it doesn't address the real issue. Public education shouldn't have to rely on billionaire saviors. These are systemic problems. Julian considered this. Systems can be redesigned. Yes, but not overnight, and not by one person. Olivia reached across the table, briefly touching his hand. What if instead of buying a solution, you helped us find one? Your analytical skills, your connections, those could be more valuable than your checkbook. The contact of her fingers against his skin was distracting. What exactly are you proposing? A coalition. Bring together business leaders, educators, parents, community organizers. Help us develop a sustainable model that could be replicated for other schools facing similar issues. It was a more complex solution than simply transferring funds, messier, less predictable, involving more variables. Yet Julian found himself intrigued by the challenge. It would require significant time investment, he noted. Yes, Olivia agreed. And you'd have to work with people who might not share your efficiency-focused worldview. You mean I'd have to tolerate irrationality? She laughed softly. I mean you'd have to value different perspectives, even emotional ones. Julian studied her, this woman who consistently refused to be impressed by his wealth, who challenged his assumptions, who saw through his carefully constructed facades, who made him want to be more than an algorithm in an expensive suit. I accept your counter-proposal, he said finally. On one condition. Which is? Dinner again. Saturday, not to discuss school funding or educational theory. Olivia tilted her head. Are you asking me on an actual date this time, Julian Blackwood? Yes, he admitted. I am. Her smile was like sunrise. Then yes, I accept. 3 weeks later, Julian stood before the school board, presenting the coalition's proposal for a public-private partnership that would not only save Westbrook, but strengthen 5 other at-risk schools in the district. Beside him stood Olivia, confident and passionate as she explained the educational components of their plan. The board voted unanimously to accept. Outside the meeting, as supporters celebrated around them, Julian found himself pulled into an unexpected embrace. Olivia's arms wrapped around him, her face pressed against his chest. After a moment of surprise, he returned the gesture, discovering that holding her felt strangely like coming home. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it," he corrected. "I merely provided analytical support." Olivia looked up at him, her eyes bright. "Stop minimizing your involvement. You showed up, Julian. You listened. You compromised. You built bridges, instead of buying the river." Before he could respond, she rose on tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief but electric, sending that now familiar current through his entire body. When she pulled away, Julian found himself at a rare loss for words. "Sorry," Olivia said, though she didn't look sorry at all. "Got carried away with the victory." Julian cleared his throat. "No apology necessary. In fact, I'd like to propose we continue that particular celebration later, perhaps after dinner." Her smile was radiant. "I'd like that very much." As they walked toward his car, surrounded by cheering teachers and parents, Julian realized something profound had changed in his internal calculations. The variables and constants, the inputs and outputs, they had all been reconfigured around a new central function, and for the first time in his life, Julian Blackwood didn't feel the need to control the outcome. The solution. 1 year later, Julian stood at the window of his office, watching the city transition from day to night. The skyline was familiar. He had observed it countless times over the years, but today, like so many things in his life, it seemed different, brighter, perhaps, more alive. His phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Westbrook graduation ceremony. 6 p.m. Julian checked his watch, a newer, less ostentatious model than he once favored. He had time to review the final details before departing. On his desk lay the prospectus for the newly established Blackwood Educational Foundation. What had begun as a solution for one school had evolved into something far more significant, a nationwide initiative to create sustainable funding models for public education. The foundation would launch officially next month with an initial endowment of $500 million. Thomas entered with a garment bag. "Your suit for the ceremony, sir." "Thank you." Julian noticed his assistant's barely contained smile. "Something amusing?" "Not amusing, sir, just unexpected. A year ago you wouldn't have attended a kindergarten graduation unless there was a merger involved." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting I've changed, Thomas?" "I wouldn't presume to comment on personal matters, sir." But his knowing expression said otherwise. After Thomas departed, Julian changed into the charcoal suit. Still impeccably tailored, but less severe than his former corporate armor. He slipped a small velvet box into his pocket, its weight both terrifying and exhilarating. The transformation of Westbrook Elementary was evident from the moment Julian arrived. Fresh paint brightened the once dull exterior. New playground equipment gleamed in the early evening sun. The parking lot was full, not just with parents' vehicles, but with community members who had rallied around the school during its near closure. Inside the gymnasium, now renovated with proper acoustics and lighting, excited kindergartners in miniature caps and gowns scurried about while parents scrambled to capture photographs. Julian navigated through the crowd, receiving handshakes and thank yous from people who once would have seemed invisible to him. "Mr. Julian!" Daniel, now sporting new glasses and an inch of additional height, barreled toward him. "Did you see my robot? It won first prize at the science fair." "I did," Julian confirmed, recalling the surprisingly sophisticated creation the boy had displayed at the district-wide competition last month. "Your algorithmic approach was quite advanced," Daniel beamed. "Ms. Winters says I have a mathematical brain like you." "A compliment indeed," Julian replied, genuinely touched. "Where is Ms. Winters?" In the classroom, helping Zoe with her speech. She's nervous. Julian made his way to Olivia's classroom, pausing in the doorway to observe unnoticed. Olivia knelt before a trembling Zoe, adjusting the girl's cap and offering gentle encouragement. "Just imagine you're only talking to me," Olivia was saying. "Forget about everyone else." "But what if I mess up?" Zoe whispered. "Then you'll fix it and keep going, just like we practiced." Olivia smiled warmly. "Remember what we say about mistakes? They're how we learn," Zoe recited. "Exactly. And you know what? The audience will love you no matter what." The scene stirred something profound in Julian's chest. Olivia's natural grace with children had always fascinated him. Her ability to blend firmness with kindness, to nurture without coddling. He had learned more about leadership from watching her teach than from any business school or executive retreat. He stepped into the room, and Olivia's face brightened upon seeing him. "Look who's here, Zoe, our special guest." The little girl turned, her nervousness momentarily forgotten. "Mr. Julian, did you bring the surprise?" Olivia shot him a questioning look. "Surprise? Zoe and I have a confidential arrangement," Julian explained, maintaining a serious expression despite Olivia's amused skepticism. He knelt down to Zoe's level, a posture that once would have seemed beneath his dignity. "And yes, I brought it, but it's for after your speech." Zoe nodded solemnly. "I'll do good, I promise." "I have complete confidence in your abilities," Julian assured her. After Zoe scampered off to join her classmates, Olivia approached him, straightening his already perfect tie. "A confidential arrangement with a 6-year-old? Should I be concerned?" "Professional discretion prevents me from commenting," Julian replied, enjoying their familiar banter. He captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You look beautiful." Olivia glanced down at her simple blue dress, coincidentally the same shade she'd worn at the gala where they first met. "You're biased." "I'm data-driven," he corrected, "and my analysis is conclusive." She laughed, the sound still musical to his ears even after months of hearing it daily. "We should get to the ceremony. I have 26 kindergarteners about to explode with excitement." The graduation ceremony was everything Julian once would have dreaded. Chaotic, emotional, inefficient. Children forgot lines. Parents cried. The principal's microphone kept cutting out. Yet Julian found himself thoroughly engaged, even moved, particularly when Zoe delivered her speech flawlessly, beaming with pride as she described what she'd learned during the year. When all the miniature diplomas had been distributed, and the last teary parent had taken a final photograph, Julian fulfilled his promise to Zoe, presenting her and each classmate with a custom-designed robotics kit developed specifically for early learners. "That was your surprise?" Olivia asked later as they helped clean up the emptying gymnasium. "You've been working on those for months. Why keep it secret from me?" "Because you would have objected to the expense," Julian replied pragmatically. "And I've learned that sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission." "A dangerous principle," she observed, though her expression was fond. "Especially from someone who once calculated every decision to 3 decimal places." "I still calculate," Julian admitted. "I've simply adjusted my metrics." When the last of the decorations had been cleared away, Julian suggested a walk through the school garden, another new addition, funded by the coalition he had helped create. The evening was warm, the air fragrant with jasmine and possibility. They strolled in comfortable silence until reaching the small gazebo in the garden's center. Julian had chosen this moment carefully, had rehearsed his words, had considered every variable. Yet when he turned to face Olivia, all his prepared speeches evaporated. "What is it?" she asked, noticing his sudden tension. "You've been checking your pocket all evening." Julian took a deep breath. Algorithms and analyses had built his empire, but they wouldn't serve him here. This moment required something else entirely: vulnerability. "A year ago," he began, "I thought I understood how the world functioned. Everything was quantifiable, predictable, manageable through sufficient data and correct calculations. Olivia waited patiently, her eyes warm in the fading light. Then you introduced an unexpected variable into my equations, Julian continued. You challenged my assumptions. You showed me that the most valuable things in life, compassion, connection, love, can't be quantified or predicted. They must be experienced. He reached for her hand, marveling still at how perfectly it fit within his own. I once told you that what happened between us was an error in judgment. I was wrong, Olivia. It wasn't an error. It was the beginning of the most important discovery of my life. Julian removed the velvet box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a ring with a simple solitaire diamond, not ostentatious but perfect in clarity and color, like the woman before him. I've analyzed this decision from every angle, he said softly. And while I can calculate the financial implications, the logistical considerations, even the statistical probabilities of various outcomes, I cannot quantify how much I love you. I can only tell you that it's the most certain thing I've ever known. Tears had begun to form in Olivia's eyes, but she was smiling. Olivia Winters, will you marry me? Have you created a spreadsheet for this? She asked, her voice trembling with emotion. A cost-benefit analysis of matrimony? Several, Julian admitted. But they all proved irrelevant. This isn't about logic or efficiency. It's about choosing you every day for the rest of my life. Olivia's hands framed his face, her touch gentle yet grounding. You really have changed, Julian Blackwood. Not changed, he corrected. Evolved. You helped me discover parts of myself I didn't know existed. The parts that can sit cross-legged with kindergarteners, that can lose at Candyland without questioning the game's validity. Among others, he acknowledged. You haven't answered my question. Olivia's smile was radiant. Yes, Julian, of course yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Julian felt a profound sense of rightness, as if the universe's equations had suddenly aligned into perfect harmony. Later that evening, they sat on the balcony of his penthouse. The city lights spread below them like a reflection of the stars above. Olivia rested against his chest, her hand occasionally lifting to catch the diamond's sparkle in the ambient light. Did you ever think we'd end up here? She asked. That first night when you so coldly dismissed what happened between us? Julian considered the question. No, I was too focused on controlling variables to recognize that sometimes the most beautiful outcomes arise from what we can't control. The billionaire and the kindergarten teacher, Olivia mused. It sounds like a fairy tale. Or a carefully calibrated partnership, Julian suggested. Your intuition balances my analysis. Your compassion tempers my calculation. Together we create something neither could achieve alone. That's not very romantic, she teased. No? Julian turned her gently in his arms, meeting her gaze directly. I've built empires, Olivia. I've created algorithms that predicted market fluctuations no one else could see. I've amassed more wealth than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But nothing compares to the feeling of waking up beside you, of hearing your laugh, of watching you transform lives with nothing more than patience and belief. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. If that's not romance, then I've misunderstood the concept entirely. Olivia's eyes shimmered with emotion. For someone who once claimed emotional detachment, you've become quite eloquent about feelings. I've had an excellent teacher, Julian replied, and I've discovered that some lessons are worth learning no matter how they disrupt one's carefully ordered world. As Olivia rose on tiptoes to kiss him, Julian reflected on the strange mathematics of love. How what had begun as what he'd deemed a mistake had proven to be the most correct calculation of his life. How surrendering control had given him something far more valuable than power. How in losing his heart, he had found his humanity. The man who once believed everything could be reduced to data and algorithms had discovered the most complex equation of all, and its beautiful, unexpected solution. In Olivia's arms, Julian Blackwood was no longer just a billionaire with a brilliant mind. He was a man with an open heart, forever changed by the love he never planned for but couldn't imagine living without. It was, by any calculation, the perfect result.